I didn't see anyone along the road, though the horizon was wavering, which made it hard to distinguish anything. "You ready, Otto?" I said, as I lifted him up and got back on the bike. Otto climbed onto my front, and I started the motor. He barely startled. He was becoming such a hardy little bonobo. The whir and roar beneath us was the only sound in my ears. Riding the bike was the only time I couldn't hear the constant insects and birds of Congo. I was feeling something more than fear as I rode. It was fear with a purpose, fear devoted entirely to the task of being alert. It was fear that, in the context of survival, was doing what fear was meant to do. All my edges were left sharp. When I finally got off the bike in the late afternoon, the trembling in my legs and arms from the vibration was the only evidence that any time at all had passed. I had no memory of what I'd ridden by, except the concentration hangover. I came back to being Sophie when the trail joined up with an abandoned railway and began to parallel the airport road. I could see people not 30 feet off through the foliage, a lot of people. I dismounted to see a sluggish train of women and children and the occasional man, slogging through the mud in their best clothes. Everyone was carrying something. Some women had massive nylon-wrapped packages on top of their heads, and some children had large plastic bottles, the thick dented type you usually see containing gas or chemicals, dangling from their hands. They were all heading towards the airport. The runway had been bombed out, so what were they hoping for? But the answer was another question and one that I shared. What better option did they have to hang their hopes on? They must have decided to dress up in hopes of increasing their chances of getting on a plane. One woman was in a gorgeous red and green panier wrap, her sons drowning in suits whose shoulder pads hung around their elbows. I watched the elegant and bedraggled refugees drift along and wondered whether to join them. Maybe there was some hope of salvation at the airport, some way out that all these people knew about. I could join the group, find out what was going on. But what would I do with Otto? To me, he was a treasured traveling companion. To them, he was food. As we sat there, eating a snack of cold, greasy manioc, followed by the slimy leaf in which it had been wrapped, I debated what to do. I could put Otto under my poncho like before and hope no one noticed, but if they did, if the mob wanted to take him from me, to eat or to sell, then they could. Not to mention the motorbike. I didn't have much fuel left, but that wouldn't stop them from taking it if they decided to. I had more to lose than the people in the crowd. I wasn't the same as them, not yet. I decided I'd wait until there was a gap in the flow of refugees, then dart across with Otto. A dozen people stopped in their tracks and stared at the half-white girl emerging from the wilderness, wearing a bulky poncho in the afternoon sun and pushing a motorbike. I smiled meekly and pointed to the far side of the road, trying not to make eye contact with anyone. Otto shifted on my back as I lugged the bike over furrows and puddles. The walkers didn't do anything to make my passage easier as I neared. As I got halfway across, a teenage boy stepped in front of my path. "Bonjour, La Blanche, where are you going?" I didn't answer, only continued moving forward. "Did you hear me, La Blanche? I asked you where you were going." I had about 20 feet to go, 19, 18. "The airport is not that way," another voice said. Now there was a crowd around me. I didn't dare look up to find out how many, but I could feel them surrounding me on every side but forward. They weren't blocking that yet. "If you are headed for the river, a bike won't help you," said another man. "You should give that to me." Now people were in front, but I couldn't let them stop me. I bumped into shoulders, said excuse me as I tried to push through. These were refugees, not fighters, and most kept a polite distance. But nevertheless, hands were on my neck, and then a tug on my poncho became a yank, and I fell on my back right on top of Otto. I heard him cry out and felt him scramble against the plastic and squirm his way out from under me. The bike was ripped from my hands and passed into the crowd, instantly gone. And then the hands were back, and voices were shrieking, and the hands were on Otto. I tried to get up and slipped and saw him pulled away from me. His fingers were in mine, and then they were not. As simple as that. His eyes filled with terror, and then the crowd came between us, and he disappeared. Thank you.